The windows of Sarah Mitchell's Honda Civic had transformed into opaque sheets of white, and she could no longer tell where the road ended and the ditch began. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, knuckles pale from gripping too hard, as the blizzard swallowed everything beyond her windshield. She'd driven through bad weather before. Growing up in Connecticut had taught her that much, but this was different. This was Wyoming in January, where storms didn't just inconvenience you, they buried you alive. The gas gauge hovered near empty, the heater sputtered weakly, and Sarah's phone, perched uselessly in the cup holder, displayed a single word that made her stomach clench: no service. 26 years old, fresh out of graduate school, and this was how it went into frozen on some forgotten highway because she'd been too stubborn to wait out the storm in Denver. Her principal had warned her that the weather could turn violent without notice out here, but Sarah had smiled politely and assured him she'd be fine. She was always fine, self-sufficient, capable, the kind of woman who didn't need anyone's help. Except now, watching her breath form clouds in the rapidly cooling car, Sarah realized that independence meant nothing against a force of nature that couldn't be reasoned with or outworked. She'd been driving for 3 days across the country, moving from her cramped Boston apartment to take a teaching position at Pine Ridge Elementary, a small school in a town she'd only seen in photographs. Fresh start, they called it. Running away, her mother had said. Either way, Sarah had packed her entire life into her sedan and pointed it west, chasing something she couldn't quite name: a purpose, maybe, or redemption, or just distance from the person she'd been. The car shuddered as another gust of wind slammed into it, and Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. Crying wouldn't keep her warm. Crying wouldn't make the storm stop. Crying was something the old Sarah did. The one who'd let her ex-fiancé Tilda Copyright convince her she wasn't strong enough, smart enough, brave enough. A shape emerged from the white chaos, a massive, dark, moving against the wind with impossible steadiness. Sarah's heart lurched. Bear, moose. Her city-bred brain cycled through wildlife she'd only seen in nature documentaries. Then the shape resolved into something more terrifying and more wonderful. A man, easily 6'5", wrapped in a heavy coat and cowboy hat, leading a horse through the blizzard like it was nothing more than a spring shower. He approached her window, and Sarah found herself staring up at a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of strong coffee and a dark beard dusted with snow. He made a rolling motion with his hand, and she fumbled with the window button, forgetting for a moment that the car was off. She had to open the door instead. "You can't stay here," he said, his voice deep and certain, cutting through the wind. "This storm's gonna get worse before it gets better. My ranch is half a mile up the road. You need to come with me." Sarah's urban survival instincts kicked in immediately. "I don't know you." Something flickered in his eyes: amusement, maybe, or respect. "No, ma'am, you don't." "Name's Jack Holloway. I own the Double H Ranch about 10 minutes from here." "Well, 10 minutes in good weather, 30 in this." He glanced at her gas gauge, at the ice forming on her windshield. "You've got maybe 20 minutes before this car becomes your coffin. I've got a warm house, food, and a landline that still works when the cell towers don't." "Your call." The bluntness should have frightened her, but something in his weathered face suggested he'd stated facts, not threats. Sarah looked at her phone again as still no service, then at the rapidly darkening sky. "I have supplies in the trunk," she said, making her decision. "We'll come back for them when the storm breaks. Right now, we move, or we freeze." Sarah grabbed her purse and the folder containing her teaching contract, the proof of who she was, where she belonged, and stepped out into the blizzard. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath, making her gasp. Jack's large hand steadied her elbow immediately. "Stay close to me," he commanded, and Sarah found herself grateful for the authority in his voice, for someone who knew what to do when she didn't. The walk to his ranch became a blur of white and wind and cold that penetrated straight through her inadequate wool coat. Jack's horse plodded beside them, a massive creature named Goliath, he told her, and somehow the animal's presence was comforting. If a horse could make it through this, so could she. Jack kept his hand on her arm, guiding her when she stumbled, supporting her when the wind pushed her sideways. When the ranch house finally appeared, a sprawling structure of wood and stone with warm light glowing in the windows, Sarah nearly wept with relief. Inside, The warmth hit her so suddenly it hurt. Jack helped her out of her frozen coat and guided her to a massive stone fireplace where flames crackled and danced. A border collie emerged from somewhere, tail wagging, and pressed against her legs as if offering comfort. "That's Sage," Jack said, disappearing into another room. He returned with blankets and a steaming mug. "Hot chocolate. Drink it slow." Sarah wrapped her frozen fingers around the mug and looked around the room. It was nothing like she'd expected. Books lined built-in shelves, classics mixed with poetry and modern fiction. Photographs covered the mantel. Jack with an older couple, Jack receiving some kind of award, Jack teaching a group of children how to ride. A piano stood in the corner, sheet music open on the stand. "You're a teacher," Jack said suddenly, and Sarah startled. "How did you saw the folder?" "Pine Ridge Elementary. My niece goes there. Emma Holloway, 3rd grade." Sarah smiled despite herself. "I'm taking over the 4th grade class, starting Monday. If I live that long." "You'll live," Jack said with such certainty that Sarah believed him. "Storm should break by tomorrow afternoon. We'll get your car pulled out. Make sure you're safe to drive." The "we" in that sentence settled something anxious in Sarah's chest. As the evening progressed, the storm outside intensified, but inside the ranch house, something else was growing. Jack made dinner a hearty stew that tasted like homemeal while Sarah found herself talking more than she had in months. She told him about leaving Boston, about her ex-fiancé Tilda Copyright who'd said she'd never survive outside the city, about taking the Pine Ridge job partly to prove him wrong. Jack listened more than he spoke, but when he did talk, his words carried weight. He told her about losing his wife 3 years ago to cancer, about nearly losing the ranch in his grief, about his sister and her daughter moving in and bringing life back into these walls. He talked about the loneliness of these vast spaces, but also their peace, their honesty. "Out here, you can't pretend to be something you're not," he said, staring into the fire. "The land doesn't care about your degree or your salary or what kind of car you drive. It only cares if you're tough enough, honest enough, stubborn enough to make it work." "Is that why you came out into the blizzard?" Sarah asked. "To see if I was stubborn enough." Jack smiled at a rare, genuine expression that transformed his stern features. "I came out because I saw your car from my north pasture, and out here, we don't leave people to freeze." Simple as that. But it wasn't simple, Sarah thought. In a world where most people couldn't be bothered to hold the door open, Jack had risked his life in a blizzard to save a complete stranger. No expectation of reward, no cameras to capture his heroism, just an ingrained belief that people help people when they needed it. That night, Sarah lay in the guest room at Jack's late wife's craft room, converted with fresh sheets and extra blankets, and listened to the wind howl. She thought about Marcus, her ex, who'd never made her feel safe even in their locked apartment. She thought about her parents, who'd taught her to be suspicious, to keep people at arm's length, to trust no one but herself. And she thought about Jack, who'd walked onto a blizzard because leaving someone to die wasn't something he could live with. The storm broke near dawn, and Sarah woke to a world transformed. Everything was white and sparkling, beautiful in its deadly stillness. Jack had already been up for hours so she could smell coffee and bacon, and when she emerged from the bedroom, she found breakfast waiting and Jack on the phone with a tow truck driver. "Should be able to get to your car by noon," he said. "Bob's the best in the county. He'll have you out by evening, ready to drive." Sarah nodded, but something twisted in her chest at the thought of leaving. She helped Jack clear snow from the barn, met his horses, learned their names and personalities. She met his sister Kate and niece Emma when they emerged from the other wing of the house, and Emma's immediate enthusiasm about having a new teacher made Sarah's heart ache with purpose. When Bob finally pulled her car free and declared it drivable, Sarah stood beside Jack in the fading afternoon light, struggling to find words. "Thank you," she finally said, and it seemed catastrophically inadequate. "You're gonna do good here," Jack said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Pine Ridge needs teachers who care enough to drive across the country for a fresh start." "How do you know I care?" "Because you were scared out of your mind, and you still got out of that car and walked onto a blizzard with a stranger." Takes a special kind of courage to trust people. Most folks these days don't have it. Sarah realized she was crying only when Jack gently brushed a tear from her cheek with his calloused thumb. "We have dinner every Sunday," he said quietly. "Kate, Ma, and me. Standing invitation. If you're interested, get slowly out here for newcomers. Sarah drove away from the Double H Ranch with a full tank of gas. Jack had insisted and a phone number written in careful handwriting on the back of her teaching contract. She made it to her new apartment in Pine Ridge just as the sun was setting, and she spent her first night in Wyoming thinking not about what she'd left behind, but about what she'd found. Proof that kindness wasn't extinct, that strangers could become saviors, that sometimes the best moments of your life came wrapped in the worst storms. On Monday, Emma Holloway bounced into her classroom with a huge smile, followed eventually by a tall rancher who'd taken the morning off to see Sarah's first day. Jack stood in the back of the classroom during her introduction, hat in his hands, and Sarah felt his presence like a promise that this vast, intimidating place might become home after all. The blizzard had trapped her, yes, but in doing so, it had also freed her from fear, from isolation, from the belief that asking for help meant weakness. Jack Holloway's bold offer to save her life had done more than prevent her from freezing. It had taught her that humanity still flourished in unexpected places, that heroes still existed off the pages of storybooks, and that sometimes you had to lose your way completely to find exactly where you belonged. 3 months later, when Sarah finally made it to Sunday dinner at the Double H Ranch, she realized she'd been wrong about independence. True strength wasn't refusing help up, it was accepting it, reciprocating it, building something bigger than yourself through connection and trust, and the simple, revolutionary act of caring about strangers and storms.